We now will have the incredible honor of presenting a Dean's Medal and hearing from Richard Engel. The Dean's Medal, first of all, has been around for over 30 years. I think the easiest way I can give you a sense of it is simply to say we select people who have had significant impact in the world. A few names: Dr. Helene Gayle, President and CEO of CARE USA; Mada Ahtisaari, international negotiator, recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize; John Kerry, United States Secretary of State; Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State; Rajiv Shah, head of U.S. Agency for International Development; Arianna Huffington, co-founder and editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post. This year, it's my privilege to present this Dean's Medal to my very good friend, Richard Engel. So let me tell you a little about Richard Engel, the latest recipient of this historic Dean's Medal. He is, I think, the most insightful, thoughtful, articulate commentator on global events, particularly with a focus in his area of deep expertise, the Arab world. He is currently the chief international correspondent for NBC News. Before that, he worked at ABC News. Before that, CBS. Before that, he was a freelance reporter. Let me unpackage that for you. He went to Stanford as an undergraduate and decided that he would move to the Middle East in order to learn the language, learn the culture, learn the history, so he could become an honest, critically eyed reporter of that region. Today, he speaks Arabic very fluently, various dialects, and I tested him with Layla Fawaz, and he passed the Layla Fawaz test. Richard is someone who personifies what Edward R. Murrow said about journalism. Quote, "To be persuasive, we must be believable. To be believable, we must be credible. To be credible, we must be truthful." It is as simple as that. In this era of alternate fact, of internet lies, of competing visions of reality, Richard Engel is an old-time reporter. He's a young guy, but he has that kind of reporter's sensibility that someone like Edward R. Murrow brought to the very best of the journalism career. I could walk you through the awards Richard has won, and they are numerous. It really is, it's 3 pages of awards. So I'm just going to stipulate he's won a ton of awards. And I'm going to give you just one statistic. Richard Engel has won 9 Emmy Awards. He is also an award-winning writer, having published 3 books, the latter of which landed on the bestseller list. He was captured at one point in the Middle East, was held captive for several days, barely escaped with his life. I'll close by saying there are 3 things about Richard Engel that you should know as he steps to this podium. One is that he is truthful. And in today's world, for a reporter, that's the bedrock. Number 2 is that he is deeply knowledgeable in the field upon which he speaks. He studied Arabic for 4 years to become the preeminent reporter of that region. He invests in order to tell the truth. And lastly, he is a wonderful friend to me and to Laura. He is a wonderful husband to his wife, Mary. He's the father of a young son, Henry. I spent a lifetime in the military, and I watch people, reporters like Richard Engel, who go into the most dangerous places in the world, armed only with a camera, a smartphone, and their own courage. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Engel.
That was quite an introduction. Thank you very much, Dean Stavridis. Thanks to all of you. But before I start, just one administrative note. Those who didn't contribute to the class gift, there is someone waiting outside for you. For the 71% and the 75%, or those who didn't make that cutoff, we know who you are. So you are no longer, until you participate, fully a member of the mafia, as it was called. And if you don't contribute, I will read all 1,000 pages of the Peter Ackerman dissertation. So, with that said, so you are among the world's future leaders, scholars, and foreign policy experts. Soak that in. That should feel good. Future leaders of foreign affairs, the next champions of human rights and democracy. Congratulations. Mom and dads out there, you should be incredibly proud. But to all of you, the graduates, you should also be a little bit nervous because this is a big responsibility. What are you going to do as leaders in foreign affairs? I want to talk to you a bit today about a profession I know well, journalism, and so-called fake news, and what they mean for democracy, and what you can do to protect it. Let me start out by saying that the news media and journalism are under attack. Doesn't sound terrible, nobody likes journalists, but it's much more serious than that. It's not just journalists who are under attack. It is the truth itself that is under assault when officials use their public offices to defend alternative facts, and when leaders with executive powers pretend that the truth is only what they say it is. Censorship today is alive and well. It's all around us. There are television screens, cell phones, newspapers, blogs, tweets, words and video everywhere. And censorship is hiding in this crowd. Censorship is more subtle than it has ever been, and it's dangerous. Let's go back a bit. When the internet first started, I was there. I'm not that old, but I remember it when it came about. I was in college, and it wasn't there the day before, and then bang, it was around. And I remember when the internet first came about, I thought it was going to be the end of censorship. I was wrong. I was naive, but I did have a point. Think back a little further. Go back to, say, World War II, and imagine the partisans in France opposing the Nazis. How would they get their message out? How would they counter the evil regime's propaganda? It was not easy. They had real physical challenges blocking them. The partisans had to get to a printing press, gain control of that press by stealing it or buying it or persuading the owner to help them. They had to then print the newspaper, set the type, source the ink, and finally actually distribute it to get the message into people's hands. And while doing this, the Nazis were hunting them down. It sounds impossible, but people did do this. Very, very brave people. They would leave leaflets on buses or scatter them in public places. It was slow and tough and dangerous. That kind of censorship was very straightforward. It was brutal and horrific, but it was easy to understand. You printed the wrong thing, you got killed, or the message was simply blocked. Censorship continued like this in varying degrees for a long time. Back in the 1990s, I worked in Egypt. I edited a local newspaper, and I actually met the state censor. That was a job with a job title, censor. And I went to his office, and his name was on the desk, and he even seemed to like what he did. He was proud of his job. He didn't hide it. And he thought he was protecting Egyptian values and defending his government from the lies spread by foreign journalists like me. Obviously, I didn't agree with him, but it was clear. You could meet him, you could talk to him, I could try and debate with him why I thought an article should be kept or a specific paragraph should be kept in an article while he wanted to cut it. The rules of the game were clear. It was bad, but clear. In Iraq, where I worked for many years, it was much worse. Under Saddam Hussein, if you had a satellite telephone, you had to lock it up at the Ministry of Information. When I was in North Korea, we actually had to wear armbands that identified us as members of the foreign press so that we couldn't, I assume, walk up to someone and ambush them and start asking them politically sensitive questions and they wouldn't know who we were, as if the giant camera we were walking around with and the government minder standing next to us didn't already give us away. All of this was designed to control what you said and what you wrote, and most importantly, what you shared with the public. Now, here comes the internet. Suddenly, anyone can write anything from anywhere, anytime, across borders for free. I thought that's it. It's game over for censorship. But it wasn't. Why not? And I thought about this for a long time. Why isn't censorship dead when anyone can write anything and get it published instantaneously for free? Imagine those partisans. How excited would they be if you said, Jacques, don't worry about the printing press in the barn. There's this little machine. You can push a button and get the message you want to everyone all the time. It costs nothing. I think he probably would have been pretty jazzed about that. And I think he probably would have thought, like I did, that it was the end of censorship, that censorship had been beaten. But in the real world, it wasn't beaten. Instead, censorship changed. Since government security forces and big corporations can no longer control what's said and who reads it, the smarter ones adopted a new tactic. They changed the model of censorship. Instead of limiting what's said, they decided to flood the market. They decided to blur the message, to inject so much static into the mix that the truth is diluted, hidden, distorted, contradicted, and utterly confused. Instead of stopping a report, they'd smother it with nonsense, disinformation, or what these days is called fake news. It's actually pretty clever. It's very devious. If there's a story out there and you don't like it and you can't take it down, you hide it by putting so much stuff around it that you can't see it anymore. I call this static censorship, because what you end up with is like the static on old television sets, a meaningless jumble of pictures and sounds. No clarity, just white noise. The new censorship, this static censorship, distorts the truth by bombarding people with fake news so that they don't know what to believe, what's true, what's false, what's propaganda, and what's not. And in the end, and this is the goal, I believe, people get frustrated and ultimately decide that all news is equally tainted, so they tune out. If you can't find the truth or get exhausted trying to find it, you give up, and censorship wins. Since letters were first set on printing presses, censorship has worked by limiting the number of words and the kinds of words people were allowed to see. Today it's the opposite. Censorship works by overwhelming people with words and images, so they end up drowning in a meaningless torrent. So, how do we fight it? First of all, we need to train our eyes. We need to recognize that static is being thrown in our way and learn to look through it the way an art restorer can see a Madonna and Child beneath the graffiti and dirt and grime. We in the media need to turn up the volume to increase the power of our message, to make the colors more vibrant so that they are harder to paint over. There is a war underway for the truth, and we're only in the opening battles. But it's important for you to know what you're up against. Static censorship also makes it harder for us to actually see what's going on around us. When people are bombarded with information, true, false, deliberately false, and the most sinister of all, deliberately half-true, they end up totally confused. I can't tell you how many times I've had people come up to me and say, "Oh my God, the world these days, it just seems so crazy." It drives me crazy to hear that, because it's not crazier than it ever was. It's just seems more complicated because there's so much information out there, a lot of it deliberately untrue, designed to confuse us, designed to mislead us. But there are patterns, and what you need to do is train your ears to hear these patterns and train your eyes to see through the static. And I think this is one of the most important skills that you, as future foreign policy leaders, can have. Dictators, for example, are exceptionally common. They're not rare, they're not anomalies, they are the cockroaches of world politics. They are what creep in and take over when you don't keep your house clean. They are hard to get rid of, they are ancient, but thankfully, they are also very predictable. They follow patterns, patterns that are hard to see in the current environment out there. Here are a few of their qualities. Perhaps you can hear some echoes of history. Dictators, 1, attack the media. 2, they hold mass rallies to show their strength. 3, they claim to represent the silent majority against the privileged elite. This is an especially popular one, from Hitler to the Bolsheviks. 4, dictators are narcissistic. Think Nero or Saddam Hussein. 5, they like to see their names and images in public places, preferably written in huge letters. There are statues all over North Korea. Saddam had his portrait in every office. 6, dictators emphasize their physical strength, vigor, and energy. 7, they believe they are geniuses and like to quote from their own books. Gaddafi had his green book, there was Mao's little red book, there's a little book in Turkmenistan. 8, dictators attack the intelligence agencies and pit them against each other. It keeps them busy. 9, they favor loyalty over competence. 10, they increase military spending to buy loyalty from the armed forces. 11, dictators use the words enemy, cancer, and traitor to describe anyone who opposes them. These are very dangerous words, and they can lead to violence. 12, dictators weaken other institutions of government, especially the legislative branch. 13, they ignore or co-opt the courts. 14, they put family members into positions of power, especially as close advisors and possible heirs. Mubarak wanted his son in power. Assad put his son in power. There are few things more closely associated with dictators than nepotism. Corruption. Dictators steal. It sounds obvious, but they do. And there are good and bad things about this. The good thing is that dictators are very predictable. The bad thing is they follow a pattern that generally works. 16, dictators claim that only they can solve the problems of their country and that without them, the state collapses. 17, they lie about history. 18, they attempt to rewrite the Constitution. 19, they present themselves as victims of the media. They pretend they are the weak ones under attack. And 20, they take advantage of shocks to the state, a terrorist attack or a natural disaster, to tighten their grip on power. And this one worries me quite a bit today. So, the next list. What do dictators do when they are challenged? 1, they arrest journalists and close media outlets. Just look at what's happening in Turkey. They turn up the static. They flood the internet and through the internet, the airways, with disinformation, aka fake news. 3, they go to the people, to their hardcore supporters. They herd them into a stadium, lots of cameras around, and they show, look how popular I am the great leader. 4, they shake up their inner circle, firing people who are loyal to them, and then blame everything on them. 5, they engage in foreign adventures or even start wars to divert attention from problems at home. 6, they fake a coup or an assassination attempt to gain sympathy and whip up patriotic fervor. 7, they scapegoat foreigners, immigrants, and minorities to try and shift blame onto them, the outsiders, the traitors. It's crazy, but I've spent 20 years watching world affairs. I go from country to country, and truly, these are qualities you see time and time and time again. 8, they use the police to break up protests, often with extreme violence. 9, they incite their own supporters to beat up or kill their opponents. 10, they buy loyalty by giving out subsidies and tax cuts. And 11, they dismiss military leaders, fearing that those same leaders could turn against them. So, just some food for thought about what some general group of dictators sort of look like and how they act from the start of history until sort of say now. And so what is the good news? What is the good news? Well, you have to be the good news. We can't be complacent. You especially can't be complacent because we can't afford it. We can't afford you to just accept this reality. You have to work hard to defend human rights around the world, defend freedom of the press, and freedom in general. Otherwise, those roaches, they come back in the middle of the night and they settle in. So please, be aware, be skeptical, and fight for us. Truth is under attack, but I do believe that journalism will emerge stronger from this, because the more there are attempts to hide, confuse, and bury the truth in static, the more valuable the truth becomes. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Powerful. Powerful words, true words.